Hello, let me tell you my story. One day, my husband brought home a 3-month-old infant. He claimed it was the son of a distant relative who had recently been orphaned, and that he had decided to legally adopt the child. But looking into that baby's face, I saw with my own eyes the undeniable shadow of my husband, Vance Kensington, etched into his features. My mother-in-law, holding the baby in her arms, couldn't hide her absolute joy. Right in front of me, she blurted out, "This is true Kensington blood." Later, in the inner pocket of my husband's bespoke suit jacket, I discovered a prenatal care folder. The mother's name, Sloane Dempsey. The same woman who, at our wedding, had introduced herself as his cousin. The day Vance brought that infant home was a Wednesday, at 3 p.m. I remember it perfectly, because that very morning, I had been at the clinic running tests to prepare for a planned pregnancy. We had been married for 5 years, and my mother-in-law, Cordelia Kensington, never missed an opportunity to bring up the subject of children. It had started with subtle hints, which morphed into open suggestions, and finally into gratuitous humiliation. I was 32. My fallopian tubes were clear. My ovulation was regular. The doctor had assured me that physically everything was perfect, and simply advised me to relax. Driving back to our estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, with my results, I was thinking about how I would break the good news to my husband that evening. Instead, I walked into a welcoming committee in our living room. Cordelia was sitting on the velvet sofa, the baby in her arms, sporting a radiant smile. Our housekeeper, Greta, stood beside her holding a bottle of warm formula, cooing in a honeyed tone. This child is incredibly lucky to fall right into a home as prestigious as the Kensingtons. Vance stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, deep in a phone conversation. His voice was low and firm. "Yes, the paperwork is almost finalized. Custody won't be an issue." I stayed in the foyer. I swapped my heels for my indoor loafers and slipped my medical results deep into my designer tote. I walked over and asked, "Whose child is this?" My mother-in-law looked up at me. Her smile tightened slightly. She spat out dismissively, "Vance didn't tell you?" "It's the baby of one of his distant cousins. She was killed in a car crash, and the child was left all alone." Vance, with his big heart, decided to adopt him. The infant, dressed in a white velour onesie, had very fair skin and long eyelashes. He was sleeping with his eyes closed. I stared at his tiny face for a few seconds, and my heart began to pound relentlessly. The shape of his eyebrows, the curve of his jawline. The resemblance was striking. Vance hung up the phone and approached me. Standing over 6 feet tall, he blocked the light from the baccarat crystal chandelier, casting a massive shadow over my face. He placed a hand on my shoulder with a tone that left no room for argument. "Vesper, I meant to talk to you about this tonight. My cousin died suddenly. I couldn't leave the little guy to the foster care system. For now, I've brought him here. From this day forward, he is our son." "Which cousin?" I asked. "I didn't know you had a cousin who was expecting." "A distant relative. You don't know her," he replied evasively. My mother-in-law inserted herself into the conversation. "Vesper, why are you asking so many questions? Vance is doing a beautiful, charitable thing, and you're interrogating him. People are going to start saying the Kensington daughter-in-law is unspeakably petty." I didn't say another word. That evening, while Vance worked in his study, I was organizing our walk-in closet. His suit jacket was hanging on a valet stand. I was about to put it in the dry cleaning bag when my fingers brushed against something stiff in the inner pocket. A folded piece of paper. I pulled it out and opened it. It was a standard sheet of paper with an elegant letterhead, printed in gold lettering. Sutton Place Women's Clinic, Upper East Side, NY. Patient, Sloane Dempsey. Age, 28. Gestational age, 36 weeks. Procedure, ultrasound, fetal monitoring, comprehensive blood panel. On the stapled ultrasound printout, the profile of the fetus was clearly visible. I stared at that name for a long time. Sloane Dempsey. I had seen her 5 years ago at our wedding. She wore a champagne-colored bridesmaid dress and stood outside the bridal suite, watching me with slightly red, bloodshot eyes. When I asked who she was, she told me she was Vance's cousin, that they had grown up together, and that they were extremely close. I had believed her. 3 months after our wedding, I had glimpsed a text message on Vance's phone from a contact saved as cousin. The text read, "Vance, I'm pregnant." When I questioned him, he burst out laughing, claiming his cousin had texted the wrong person and that the message was meant for her own husband. He called her right in front of me, and Sloane, on the other end of the line, profusely apologized for the clumsy mistake. Once again, I had believed him, and now this prenatal file was in my hands. Mother's name, Sloane Dempsey. Date of examination, September of last year. I opened the calendar on my phone and counted back 36 weeks from September. The math pointed straight to January. Last January, Vance had told me he needed to travel to Tokyo for high-stakes negotiations regarding a merger for Kensington Holdings. He was gone for 20 full days. I folded the document, put it back exactly where I found it in the jacket pocket, and hung the garment up. I left the master suite and went downstairs. In the living room, my mother-in-law was still playing with the baby. The infant had woken up, his large, dark eyes staring blankly. "Look at those big eyes," Greta exclaimed. "Who does he look like?" "Like Vance. When he was a little boy," my mother-in-law blurted out mechanically. Realizing her blunder instantly, she shot a glance at me before adding, "Well, it's the same bloodline. Genetic resemblances are completely normal." I stood on the bottom step of the staircase, observing the infant's face. In my heart, the certainty was already absolute. But I didn't explode. I walked over, sat on the sofa, and asked calmly, "Cordelia, what is the baby's name?" "Alistair," she replied. "Vance chose it. Alistair Kensington. Alistair Kensington. The heir to the Kensington dynasty." I nodded slowly. "I'm going to get a glass of water in the kitchen." Once in the kitchen, I pressed my hands against the marble island and stared at my reflection in the stainless steel sink. Vesper Sterling, 32 years old, holding a Juris Doctor from Columbia Law School. I had passed the bar with flying colors and worked for 2 years as a federal law clerk for a judge in the Southern District of New York. That was where I had met Vance. 5 years of marriage. I had abandoned my career because my mother-in-law insisted that a Kensington wife must oversee the estate and not scatter her energy in a law firm. I gave up my ambitions for partnership and legal academia because my husband told me, "I just need you to make our house a home." For 5 years, I had endured Cordelia's icy remarks and her favorite catchphrase at every high society dinner party. "My daughter-in-law is charming. It's just a shame she isn't very gifted when it comes to giving us children." I looked up at my reflection in the window pane. My eyes were bloodshot, but I wasn't crying. I took a deep breath. I pulled out my phone and typed a single sentence into a secure notes app. Vance Kensington brought home his illegitimate child named Alistair Kensington, born to Sloane Dempsey. Then I deleted the line, not because I wanted to forget, but because I couldn't leave a digital trace. I locked the device, drank my lukewarm water, and walked out of the kitchen. In the living room, Vance had come down from his study. He was leaning over the bassinet, and his face wore an expression I had never seen before. Tenderness, adoration, total fulfillment. He had never looked at me like that. "Vance." I set my glass on the coffee table. My voice was perfectly steady. "Are the adoption formalities finalized?" "Yes, everything is under control," he replied without looking up, gently brushing the baby's cheek with his fingertip. "What do I need to do?" I asked. "Register him with the state. Add him to our insurance?" He finally looked at me. A flicker of suspicion crossed his eyes before fading. "That won't be necessary. I've outsourced all of that to a law firm. Your health is delicate right now. Just rest." I offered a faint smile. "Very well." My mother-in-law scoffed from the side. "Vesper, don't torture yourself over the details. Alistair is here now. He will be your son. Treat him well. That's all anyone asks of you." "Mom is right," Vance seconded. Greta shot me a strange look, a mix of surprise and a tinge of pity. That night, Vance didn't come to sleep in our master bedroom. He used the excuse that the baby would cry during the night and that he didn't fully trust Greta to handle it alone. I lay awake in the king-size bed, listening to the muffled sounds coming from the adjacent nursery. The infant's cries, Vance's soothing voice, and the footsteps of my mother-in-law, who even in the middle of the night came down to dote on her grandson. At 2 a.m., I got up to use the bathroom. Passing by the nursery, I noticed the door was ajar. Through the crack, I saw Vance rocking the baby in his arms, humming a lullaby. Cordelia was sitting in a nursing chair nearby, looking tired, asking in a hushed voice, "Vance, have you settled things with Sloane? Make sure no one finds out." "Relax, Mom. Sloane is already set up in Bermuda. The baby is 3 months old. Once her postpartum recovery is completely finished, I'm going to finalize her permanent residency visa and set up her trust fund over there." "That's good," my mother-in-law sighed. "And what are you going to do about Vesper?" "She won't suspect a thing," Vance replied in a detached tone. "She's lived under my roof for 5 years. She is entirely dependent on me." I stood behind the door, my fingernails digging so hard into my palms that the physical pain helped keep my mind razor sharp. I went back to my room, locked the door, and turned my phone back on. I searched for Sloane Dempsey on social media. I eventually found her private Instagram account. Her last post was from 3 months ago, geotagged in Bermuda. The photo showed tiny newborn feet. The caption, "Welcome to the world, my little prince." I scrolled down to a post from 5 years ago, the day of our wedding. The picture of her wearing that champagne dress outside my bridal suite was there. Beneath it, someone had commented, "Sloane, the man you love just married someone else. Aren't you devastated?" To which she had simply replied with a smiling emoji. I turned off the screen and closed my eyes. In the darkness, I listened to the steady, powerful beating of my own heart. From this day forward, I would not shed a single tear for this man. At 4 a.m., I opened a highly encrypted notes app on my phone. This time, I didn't delete anything. I wrote through the night. 1. Vance Kensington and Sloane Dempsey have a long-standing affair. Sloane got pregnant in January of last year and gave birth in June. This child is Vance's biological son. 2. Under the guise of an adoption, Vance has brought his illegitimate child into our marital home to make him his legal heir. 3. My mother-in-law, Cordelia Kensington, is fully aware and actively participating in the cover-up. Greta, the housekeeper, is likely complicit. 4. Imperative goal: obtain irrefutable proof, covert DNA test. Bank transfer history. Phone records. Sloane's expatriation documents. 5. Contact a ruthless attorney to evaluate options for an at-fault divorce, massive spousal support, and a lump sum settlement for emotional and financial damages. 6. Absolute rule: show zero emotion. Maintain the status quo to buy time. Once the note was finished, I locked it behind a complex passcode only I knew. At 6 a.m., before dawn, I showered and went downstairs to make breakfast. Greta was already in the kitchen. When she saw me, she jumped. "Mrs. Vesper, why are you up so early? I can handle everything. You were up half the night with the baby. Please, get some rest." I tied my apron, opened the Sub-Zero refrigerator, and took out eggs and butter. Vance likes his eggs sunny side up with the yolk perfectly runny. "I'll make them." Greta stood frozen beside me, watching me as if she wanted to formulate an apology. Finally, she turned on her heel and left. I stood at the wolf range, listening to the butter sizzle in the skillet. I cracked the egg. The white set instantly, while the yolk remained intact and glossy. Looking at, I remembered that 5 years ago, right after our wedding, I didn't even know how to fry an egg. Vance had told me he loved flawless, sunny-side-up eggs. I had practiced for an entire month, my hands sometimes dotted with burns from popping grease, until I mastered it. At the time, I foolishly thought that by working harder, I would be a flawless wife and bring happiness to this family. What absolute irony today. Breakfast was plated when Vance walked out of the nursery. He had dark circles under his eyes but seemed to be in an excellent mood. He sat at the island, admired his plate, and offered a faint smile. "Why are you up so early?" I couldn't sleep. I poured him a cup of black coffee and sat across from him. "Vance, I need to tell you something." "I'm listening," he said, leaning over his plate. "I got my medical results back from the clinic yesterday. The gynecologist confirmed that everything is perfectly normal with me. I can conceive a child without any difficulty. Vance's fork paused in midair. He slowly raised his head, locking eyes with me. I held his gaze, articulating in a soft but distinct voice, "I want a child. Our own child." A leaden silence fell over the kitchen. Vance put his cutlery down, leaned back in his chair, and stared at me with an unreadable expression. I expected him to fake joy, or at least say something comforting. Instead, he simply stated, "Vesper, we have Alistair now. The subject of another child isn't pressing. Focus on your health first." But my tests show that. He stood up abruptly, tossing his linen napkin onto the counter. "I have a crucial board meeting this morning. I won't be home for dinner." He walked out of the room. I sat alone at the island. The sunny side-up egg on my plate had grown cold, the yolk congealing into a dull film. I picked up my fork and ate it, bite by bite, even though it tasted like nothing. That evening, Vance indeed did not come home. Cordelia locked herself upstairs with the baby. Greta was washing dishes in the kitchen. I sat alone on the living room sofa, the television tuned to a cable news network I wasn't listening to. My phone buzzed. An iMessage from an unknown number. "Mrs. Kensington, it's Sloane Dempsey. Vance must have explained everything to you. I hope the baby's presence isn't too much trouble. Vance and I truly love each other. Only his family's opposition forced him to marry you. Now that we have a son, you should step aside and let us build our life. Don't worry, you won't leave empty-handed. Vance will compensate you generously." I read the message 3 times. I took a screenshot and immediately moved it into my encrypted vault. Then I replied, "I understand perfectly." The response was instant. "Are you really willing to make things easy for us? That is admirable, Mrs. Kensington. You are a good woman. A good woman!" I turned off the screen. I stood up and walked toward the nursery. The door was wide open. My mother-in-law was pacing the room, gently rocking little Alistair. "My sweet Alistair, be a good boy, my treasure. Grandma's whole heart. When you grow up, the entire Kensington Empire will belong to you." Greta was nodding as she watched. "You are truly blessed, Mrs. Cordelia. The Kensington bloodline finally has its male heir." My mother-in-law spotted me in the doorway. Her smile froze. She quickly handed the baby to Greta, stepped out of the room, and, in an uncharacteristic gesture, took my hand in a tone she intended to sound benevolent. "Vesper, I know this situation is unusual, but you must be understanding. Vance is an only child. A fortune this colossal cannot remain without a direct heir. If you had been able to carry a pregnancy to term, things would have been different. But since nature decided otherwise, Alistair will be your son, and he will respect you as such." I stared into her face, which was steeped in condescending self-assurance. Relieved, she patted my hand amicably. That night, back in my room, I locked the door and stood in front of the full-length mirror. I looked at my 32 years old, flawless skin, a maintained figure, and in my eyes, a cold but unbroken light. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. After 3 rings, a man's voice answered. "Merrick Thorne speaking." "Merrick. It's Vesper Sterling. Can I talk to you?" A silence stretched across the line. "Vesper. It's been years. What's going on?" "I want a divorce. I need your services." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." "Understood. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. at my office." I hung up, wiped the call history from my log, and placed the phone on the nightstand. I turned off the light. Tomorrow would be a new day. Merrick Thorne's law firm occupied the top floor of a glass skyscraper in Hudson Yards. Through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, you could see the entire expanse of Manhattan. I arrived 10 minutes early, wearing a classic black trench coat, hidden behind designer sunglasses and a silk scarf. Merrick had been my study partner at Columbia Law before pivoting into high-net-worth family law and founding a boutique firm notorious for its sheer ruthlessness in complex divorces. In New York's elite circles, he was known as the shark of matrimonial law. The wives he represented always walked away with devastatingly advantageous settlements. He poured me a glass of sparkling water and sat across from me. "Tell me everything." I took out my phone, opened the encrypted app, and handed it to him. He read my notes for 10 minutes, his eyebrows knitting tighter with every line. He finally looked up. "So, Your husband brings his affair baby into your marital home and attempts to force you to raise it. That is unhinged. What tangible proof do you have? Here. I swiped to show him the photo of Sloane Dempsey's medical file, the taunting text message she had sent me, and my precise timeline of events. Merrick leaned back in his leather chair, deep in thought. It's insufficient for now. The medical file proves she gave birth, not that Vance is the father. The text shows her hostility and intent, but doesn't technically prove the ongoing affair or paternity. I know, I replied. That's why I'm here. I'm not asking you to file the divorce papers today. I need you to help me build a strategy to obtain bulletproof evidence. Merrick stared at me, an appreciative smile forming on his lips. Vesper, you haven't lost an ounce of that brilliant legal mind. I was never stupid, Merrick. I was just blinded by love. Without another word, he pulled a blank legal pad from his drawer and started writing. We need several key elements. First, a covert DNA test, legally confirming Vance is Alistair's biological father. Second, a forensic trace of financial flows showing Vance funneling marital assets to Sloane. Third, communication logs proving the ongoing nature of the affair. Fourth, an exhaustive valuation of Vance's true net worth. And fifth, I interrupted, he is almost certainly hiding or organizing the offshore evasion of his financial assets as we speak. Merrick looked up. What makes you say that? He rushed to bring this child into our home to establish him as his heir. He set Sloane up in Bermuda, a known tax haven. This isn't the behavior of a husband managing a side piece. He's preparing for a midterm exit strategy, probably a divorce initiated by him, or relocating permanently, leaving me with nothing. Merrick put down his pen, his gaze turning deadly serious. Vesper, if your intuition is right, it means that if he manages to transfer the majority of his personal wealth and his shares in Kensington Holdings into offshore trusts or shell companies, you'll be left fighting over crumbs during equitable distribution. I nodded. Which is why I have to stay one step ahead. Merrick scribbled a name and an address on a card and handed it to me. It was the contact for a private intelligence firm run by Elias Vance, a former FBI financial crimes agent specializing in forensic accounting and complex domestic espionage. Go see him. Tell him I sent you. He'll handle the covert DNA swabbing and set up discreet surveillance. Don't worry about the retainer for now. We'll settle the bill when we bleed him dry. I took the card and stood up. Thank you, Merrick. Don't thank me. He stood up as well. Vesper, when you quit your clerkship at the SDNY, I tried to stop you. I told you a brilliant woman shouldn't sacrifice her career for a man. You told me you loved him and he would never let you down. Look where we are. I didn't answer. The worst mistake a brilliant woman can make is erasing herself for a man's ambition, he concluded. But the most important thing is that you finally woke up. Go. Keep me updated. Leaving Merrick's office, I went straight to Elias Vance's agency in a discreet loft in Tribeca. The man, in his late 50s, was direct and operated with military efficiency. After listening to my briefing, he asked a practical question. Can you procure a saliva sample, or hair, from your husband? Yes. And the baby as well? Yes. In that case, it'll take a few days. He pulled 2 sealed swabbing kits from a drawer and explained the protocol. Swab them, put the samples in these sterile bags, and call me. A courier will pick them up. We'll have results from a certified lab within a week. I need something else, I continued. I need to know exactly what is being said and planned inside my house. Elias thought for a moment. Planting listening devices and hidden cameras in a private residence is legally risky, but technically feasible since you legally reside there. We can install micro cameras. Can you guarantee a window of time when the house will be completely empty? Yes. I'll make sure the housekeeper and my mother-in-law are out. Excellent. Pick the day. I'll send a technician posing as an HVAC repairman to install the gear invisibly. We agreed on the following Thursday afternoon. Vance would be at his Wall Street office. Cordelia would be at her country club bridge tournament, and I would send Greta to the other side of the state to pick up specialty catering. Back at the house, routine resumed. Vance left at dawn and came back late. When he was home, he locked himself in Alistair's nursery. Cordelia didn't let the infant out of her sight. Greta busied herself, avoiding my eyes, occasionally shooting me guilty glances. I felt like a ghost in my own mansion. No one asked how I was doing. No one noticed I hadn't smiled in days, but I didn't care. I no longer needed their validation. On Thursday afternoon, Elias's technician arrived exactly on time, wearing the uniform of an elite climate control service company. While I pretended to read a novel in the living room, I watched him rapidly install pinhead-sized micro cameras. In the baccarat chandelier, on a bookshelf in Vance's study, inside an outlet near our bed, and inside the smoke detector in the nursery. 6 cameras total, covering all key living spaces. Before leaving, he showed me the dedicated app on my phone. The high-definition video and audio capture were flawless. That evening, Vance came home early. He went straight to Alistair's room. I activated the video feed on my screen. I watched him pick the baby up, pacing the room and whispering into his ear. I turned up the volume. "My son, Daddy is building you an empire of gold. Everything the Kensingtons own will be yours." My finger hovered over the touchscreen, shaking slightly. It wasn't sadness. It was a cold, methodical rage. I had managed this estate for 5 years. I had endured his mother's psychological abuse, sacrificed my law degree and my future for him. And at the end of it all, he was whispering to his affair baby that the entire family fortune would go to him, relegating me to the role of an unpaid extra, a respectable cover for his double life with Sloane. I closed the app and breathed slowly. Stay calm, Vesper. If you lose your cool, you lose the game. The next morning, I swabbed Vance's electric toothbrush. In the nursery trash can, I retrieved a soiled diaper containing the infant's epithelial cells. I sealed everything in the sterile bags and notified Elias's agency. A few days later, the private investigator handed me a secure flash drive containing a forensic audit of Vance's financial flows over the last 3 years. We located systematic monthly wire transfers to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, Elias explained. The amounts fluctuate between $20,000 and $40,000 a month. The cumulative total already exceeds $1.5 million. The ultimate beneficial owner of the shell company holding this account is Sloane Dempsey. I gripped the flash drive tight. Over $1.5 million in 3 years. Meanwhile, I practically had to justify buying a designer dress for his corporate galas. There's something more concerning, the PI continued. Our sources indicate Vance is in close contact with a Swiss wealth management firm. He is currently organizing a massive transfer of his shares in Kensington Holdings into a foreign proxy structure. If he finalizes this move, his personal, taxable assets in the United States will officially be reduced to near zero. Keep digging, I ordered. I don't care what it costs. Once locked alone in my bedroom, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The wire transfers were executed on the 15th of every month, without fail. Scrolling back to February of 3 years ago, my eyes stopped on the date, February 15th. I opened the photo app on my phone to check what we were doing that day. It was Valentine's Day. Vance had bought me a massive bouquet of red roses, taken me to a Michelin-starred restaurant overlooking Central Park, and whispered in my ear, "Vesper, you are the love of my life." That night, he had drunk a bit too much champagne and fallen asleep early. I had seen a brief notification on his screen. Funds transferred successfully. At the time, I naively assumed it was a standard business transaction. Today, I knew the money was going to Sloane, and his declarations of love were nothing but a sick theatrical performance. A week later, the DNA lab report came back. The probability of Vance Kensington's paternity regarding Alistair Kensington was 99.9%. I then reviewed the hidden camera footage from the previous night. A conversation between my husband and my mother-in-law in the living room. "Vance, what are you going to do about Vesper? She's been so quiet lately, it worries me. It's not like her." "Don't stress, Mom. She's submissive by nature. She doesn't have the spine to rebel. And even if she eventually found out about Sloane and the kid, what could she possibly do? She has no job, no independent income. If she divorces me, she won't even be able to afford rent in Manhattan. She'll never dare make a scene." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. Her entire life depends on my signature." I turned off the video, walked to the window, and looked out over the estate's sprawling lawn. Cordelia's prized rose bushes were in full bloom. I sent a text to Merrick. "Evidence secured. When do we strike? The reply came immediately. Wait a little longer. The exact mechanics of his offshore asset transfer aren't fully executed yet. Let him put it all in motion so we can nail him criminally for fraudulent conveyance and tax evasion. How are you feeling? Merrick asked in a second text. I have never felt so powerful. It was the truth. When you stop loving someone, when you expect nothing more from them and abandon all illusions, you achieve absolute freedom. I was no longer the wife of Vance Kensington. I was Vesper Sterling, 32, technically unemployed, but armed with a bulletproof dossier, a ruthless lawyer, an elite investigator, and an iron will to burn his world to the ground. And then, our master plan almost derailed due to a totally unforeseen biological event. For 3 consecutive mornings, I was hit with violent nausea and dizziness the moment I got out of bed. The smell of brewing coffee made me gag uncontrollably. Assuming it was a stomach bug, I took over-the-counter meds, to no avail. On the 3rd night, looking in the bathroom mirror, a realization struck me like lightning. My period was 2 months late. My heart skipped a beat. Taking advantage of Vance being out, I took an Uber to an all-night pharmacy. I bought 3 pregnancy tests from different brands. Back home, behind a locked door, I took them. 3 times in a row, 2 bold pink lines appeared. I slid down against the cold bathroom tile, staring at the plastic sticks for a long time. I was pregnant. Pregnant. By the man whose ruin I was currently orchestrating. A storm raged in my head. What should I do? Terminate the pregnancy or carry it to term? If I had an abortion, I would permanently cut ties. The divorce would be clean, my freedom absolute. If I kept the baby, I would be tied to the Kensington family for the rest of my life. But on the other hand, this unborn child was the ultimate trump card. A child born within wedlock. The sole legitimate heir to the dynasty. Standing against Sloane Dempsey's affair baby. Didn't this family have a medieval obsession with bloodlines and legacy? Hadn't they humiliated me for years, believing I was barren? I stood up, washed my face, and wrapped the tests in a plastic bag. I walked them out to the exterior dumpsters myself, so Greta would never find them. I went back to my room and sent an encrypted text to Merrick. I'm pregnant. He called me immediately, his voice tense. Are you sure? 3 positive tests. A heavy silence hung on the line. What are you going to do? I'm keeping it. Vesper. Think this through. If this child is born, the divorce gets infinitely more complicated. You'll be tethered to him forever. I have thought it through, Merrick. This baby is my nuclear option. The Kensington family operates on a rigid patriarchal model. Cordelia despised me because I couldn't give her an heir. Today, I am carrying that legitimate heir. If it's a boy, they'll do anything to stop me from taking him, which gives me infinite negotiating leverage. And if it's a girl, it'll be even sweeter. They'll see their desperately wanted male heir relegated to an illegitimate bastard, while my daughter becomes the only legal, direct-line heiress to the family fortune. Merrick let out a dark, admiring laugh. Vesper, you are terrifying. That is exactly how you survive in this world. The next day, I went to the clinic to medically confirm the pregnancy. The diagnosis was clear. 6 weeks pregnant. Perfect embryonic development. Detectable heartbeat. I saved the ultrasound scan to my encrypted vault. Returning to the estate, I found Vance in the living room, lounging in front of the TV, while Cordelia fawned over baby Alistair. Greta had just brought in a tray of fresh fruit. I walked over and sat down next to my husband. Vance, I have an important announcement. He turned his head toward me, his eyes carrying their usual indifference. I'm listening. I'm pregnant. The atmosphere in the room froze instantly. Cordelia's hand hovered stiffly over the bassinet. Greta stopped dead in her tracks in the doorway, the silver tray trembling in her hands. Vance's face morphed from indifference to shock, and then to pure, unadulterated disgust. It wasn't joy, or even constructive surprise. It was sheer hostility. What did you just say? He gritted out. I am 6 weeks pregnant. The heartbeat is strong. I pulled the ultrasound from my bag and set it on the coffee table. My mother-in-law reacted first. She practically threw Alistair into Greta's arms and lunged at the printout, inspecting it frantically. Her features were twisted in panic. She looked at the paper, looked at me, then turned to her son. Vance, this is impossible. It's a fake. Shut up, Mom! Vance snapped in an icy voice. He stood up and glared at me with pure contempt. Vesper, do you honestly think you can play me with a forged ultrasound? For 5 years, Greta has poured a dose of liquid oral contraceptives into your warm almond milk every single morning. You cannot possibly be pregnant. It is scientifically impossible. I felt a shock of unimaginable violence punch me in the gut. The milk. The warm milk Greta religiously prepared for me every morning. I slowly turned my eyes toward the housekeeper. She stood there, ashen. The silver tray slipped from her fingers, crashing onto the hardwood floor with a deafening clatter. Greta, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Is what he's saying true? The woman opened her mouth, unable to make a sound, her pleading eyes darting toward Cordelia. The older woman deliberately looked away. Vance scoffed, completely indifferent. Don't bother interrogating her. I ordered her to do it. I couldn't risk you getting pregnant before Alistair's situation was stabilized. The Kensington bloodline only needs one legitimate heir. A child from you has no place in this family. No place. I held his gaze, standing up to face him. Vance, you claim you've been drugging me with contraceptives without my knowledge for 5 years. Then how do you explain the fact that I am very much 6 weeks pregnant, and this child's heart is beating? Either your drugs expired, or your supplier conned you. Either way, the biological reality is right here. The lab tests are definitive. If you doubt it, we can drive to the hospital right now for a blood test supervised by a notary. Cordelia snatched the ultrasound again, checking the hospital stamps, the chief of medicine's signature, and today's date. It was flawless. Vance, my mother-in-law stammered, pale as a ghost. This document is completely authentic. So what? Vance ripped the photo from her hands, tore it in half, and threw the pieces on the floor. You're getting an abortion, he stated in a clinical tone, as if scheduling a conference call. The decision is made. This child will never carry the Kensington name. Tomorrow morning, I'm taking you to the clinic. You have no choice. He stepped closer, violently grabbing my chin, forcing me to look into his eyes. Vesper, you live under my roof. You eat at my table. Every dime you spend comes from my platinum card. If I tell you to carry a child, you carry it. If I tell you to abort, you abort. Is that clear? I stared at him. There was no trace left of the man I had once loved. I let out a sharp, nervous laugh. Vance tensed. What's so funny? My own stupidity, I replied. Stop right there, Cordelia shrieked behind me. Vesper, do not be ungrateful. Vance is acting for your own good. Who is going to take care of a newborn if you're so stubborn? Alistair is still so little. It's already too much work. Are you trying to push us over the edge? I turned back to face her. Cordelia, you're in such a rush to see me abort, simply because you are terrified I might give birth to a legitimate son who would obliterate the inheritance claims of your precious bastard. Isn't that right? Cordelia's face turned crimson. How dare you speak such vile slander? Enough! Vance barked. Vesper, the discussion is over. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I've booked an appointment at Sutton Place Women's Clinic with a specialist who handles our family's discreet matters. Cooperate, and everything goes smoothly. Otherwise, I will become much less polite. I didn't bother answering. I walked up the stairs and locked myself in my suite. I slid down the door, placing a hand on my still flat stomach. I'm so sorry, my baby, I whispered. I'm sorry to put you through this, but I promise you, I will never let them touch you. I grabbed my phone and texted Merrick. Vance knows about the pregnancy. He confessed to poisoning me with birth control. He wants to force me to abort tomorrow at 9 a.m. at Sutton Place Women's Clinic. Merrick replied instantly. What are you going to do? I am not aborting. I have a plan, but I need you to pull some strings. Tomorrow morning, I will pretend to comply and get in his car. I want you to contact your connections in the medical administration at that clinic. Make sure an extensive pre-op consultation is forced on me the second I arrive. The doctor must draft a report stating a massive medical contraindication to any termination procedure. Consider it done, Merrick answered. Dr. Rosalind Hayes, the Deputy Director of Gynecology at Sutton Place, is an old law school connection of mine who pivoted to medicine. I'm calling her right now. One last thing, I added. Draft the marital settlement agreement. The moment I have that medical certificate in hand, I am giving Vance an ultimatum. Since he categorically refuses to let me birth his heir under his roof, I am using this pregnancy to buy my permanent freedom. Have you set your terms? Yes. First, sole legal and physical custody of the unborn child. Vance expressly waives all parental rights and visitation. Second, a lump sum spousal support payment of $3 million, wired within 60 hours of signing. Third, I waive all claims to the division of marital assets regarding Kensington Holdings. I leave him his company, but he signs away my freedom, unconditionally. Merrick took a moment to reply. Vesper, do you realize what you're giving up? A full trial exposing his assets would net you $15 to $20 million easily. I know, I typed back. But a standard judicial divorce would take years of litigation. He would use all his wealth and connections to destroy me and try to take the child. I don't want his dirty money. I want my freedom and my baby's safety. $3 million is more than enough to rebuild our lives. Agreed. I'm drafting the agreement tonight. I'll get it to you tomorrow. At 7 a.m. the next day, I went down to the kitchen. Greta was already there. Seeing me, she almost dropped her dish towel. She shot me a fleeting, terrified look, her face contorted with guilt. I ignored her. I opened the fridge. I deliberately bypassed the glass bottle of almond milk and poured myself a simple glass of store-bought orange juice. Greta approached with heavy steps. Mrs. Vesper, Mr. Vance told me not to serve you breakfast this morning because of your medical procedure. I know. I downed the juice in one gulp. She hesitated, then mumbled, Ma'am, are you truly pregnant? I turned to her. Greta, for 5 years you slipped chemical substances into my drink every morning, swearing they were high-end vitamins to boost my health. Do you honestly think I would joke about something like this? The housekeeper's face turned the color of ash. I swear to God, I didn't know they were contraceptives. Mrs. Cordelia swore they were supplements prescribed by a top doctor to help you conceive. I swear it. Whether she was telling the truth or not didn't matter to me anymore. Vance walked downstairs. His bespoke suit was immaculate, his hair perfectly styled. He looked ready for a Wall Street boardroom. Seeing me at the island, he snapped coldly. Let's go. The company Lincoln Navigator was waiting with the family chauffeur. Vance got in the back, and I sat on the opposite side, maintaining maximum physical distance. Throughout the entire drive toward Manhattan, he didn't even glance at me, his eyes glued to his smartphone. Out of the corner of my eye, I could read the contact name, Sloan. He was telling her he was arriving at the clinic to solve the problem permanently and telling her not to worry. I turned my head to watch the avenues of New York roll by. I had lived in this city for 10 years. I knew every street. But today, it all felt foreign and distant. The SUV parked in the underground garage of Sutton Place Women's Clinic. Vance got out first, grabbed me firmly by the wrist, and dragged me toward the elevator with a grip so tight I had to stifle a gasp of pain. No scenes, he whispered in my ear, a raw threat. We went up to the VIP obstetrics floor. The hallways were bright and welcoming, filled with glowing pregnant women accompanied by their partners. I was the only one walking through this space like a prisoner, being led to the gallows by her own husband. The receptionist recognized Vance immediately and beamed. Mr. Kensington, the doctor is expecting you. Please follow me. We were led into a spacious office. A doctor in his 50s stood up to warmly shake Vance's hand. Mr. Kensington, a pleasure to see you again. Your mother explained the delicate situation. Rest assured, it's a routine, perfectly controlled procedure. It won't take more than 20 minutes. He turned to me, a shadow of professional pity crossing his eyes before being masked by a neutral smile. Ma'am, please hop up on the exam table for a quick ultrasound so we can precisely date the pregnancy. I lay down, the cold gel on my stomach, the wand gliding across my skin. On the monitor, a tiny shape appeared nestled in my uterus. A rapid, steady pulse flickered in the center. The doctor adjusted his measurements. The gestational sac is perfectly positioned. Cardiac activity is excellent. We are at roughly 7.5 weeks. 7 weeks. One more than my estimate. Vance interjected in a flat tone, standing near the table. Doctor, when can the procedure be done? The doctor checked his chart. In theory, today. But state regulations require a comprehensive pre-op blood panel to rule out any surgical risks. We could schedule the procedure for first thing tomorrow morning. Fine, put it on the books for tomorrow morning, Vance decided. He pulled out his platinum card and tossed it on the desk. Bill, the entire process today. I want the highest level of privacy and comfort for my wife. Just then, there was a knock on the door. A young nurse peeked in. Doctor, Dr. Hayes needs you immediately for an emergency in surgical suite B. The doctor apologized and rushed out, leaving us alone with the nurse. She turned to me. Mrs. Kensington, I need to draw your blood for the pre-op panel. Please follow me to the lab. Vance nodded for me to go. I followed her down the hall, but instead of stopping at the standard lab, she took 2 turns and ushered me into an office bearing a brass plaque. Dr. Rosalind Hayes, Deputy Director. A woman around 35 with short hair and gold-rimmed glasses stood up to greet me with a warm handshake. Vesper Sterling. I'm Rosalind Hayes, a close friend of Merrick Thorne. Have a seat, we don't have much time. She sat across from me. Merrick briefed me on the extreme severity of your situation. Everything is arranged. Under the guise of screening, I am going to diagnose a severe, life-threatening hemostasis anomaly, essentially. A massive risk of uncontrollable hemorrhaging. I will issue an official medical report strictly prohibiting any surgical or chemical termination outside of a highly specialized Level 1 Trauma University hospital. No private clinic in New York State will touch you with this file. At the same time, I'm running a real panel to ensure you and the baby are actually healthy. Thank you so much, doctor, I whispered, a massive wave of relief washing over me. Don't mention it. As a physician, seeing women coerced into aborting under pressure from wealthy abusers makes me sick to my stomach. I'm happy to help you protect this baby. She performed a rapid clinical exam, ran an EKG, and personally drew my blood. A few minutes later, she handed me a sealed envelope containing my real flawless results, along with a falsified official hospital report citing a severe blood coagulation deficit that carried a high risk of fatal hemorrhaging or emergency hysterectomy if operated on. I walked back to the first doctor's office. Vance was waiting, impatiently checking his Rolex. Why did that take so long? He demanded, scowling. There was a line at the lab, I replied calmly. The male doctor returned, holding Dr. Hayes's report, which a secretary had just handed him. Reading it, his face dropped. He looked at Vance, visibly uncomfortable. Mr. Kensington, your wife's blood work reveals a severe constitutional anomaly in her coagulation. Ethically and medically, I absolutely cannot greenlight a termination procedure in this facility. The hemorrhagic risk is far too high for a private clinic. Vance's face fell. What does that mean? That's impossible. As things stand, yes. A severe hemorrhage could be fatal or require emergency removal of the uterus. I strongly recommend an in-depth hematology workup and corrective treatments over several weeks before we even consider moving forward. How long will that take? Vance demanded. At minimum, a month, assuming her parameters normalize. Vance stood up abruptly, pale with suppressed rage, powerless to explode in front of the clinical staff. He shot me a murderous glare. A month, if necessary. He spat, before storming out of the room. Once we were back in the back of the Navigator, the atmosphere dropped to freezing. You orchestrated this, didn't you? He snapped suddenly. Orchestrated what? My blood test? You think I'm stalling? I turned to face him. Vance, do you honestly believe I could forge lab results at one of the top private clinics in Manhattan? What benefit would I get from dragging this nightmare out one more day? He didn't answer. The doctor was explicitly clear. I risk my life or the permanent loss of my fertility if there are complications. Do you genuinely want me dead or mutilated just to get your way? He looked away, staring at the New York skyline rolling past the tinted window. The moment we returned to the Greenwich estate, Cordelia was waiting in the foyer. No, Vance barked, throwing his suit jacket onto the mahogany console. The blood tests prohibit any immediate procedure. We have to wait a month. Cordelia's face turned purple. She glared at me with hateful suspicion. Tests! It's a performance! She's refusing to abort. It's obvious. Mom, the chief of medicine personally signed the refusal protocol due to a massive hemorrhage risk. Vance fired back, exhausted. I don't care about their Manhattan protocols. I have lived my entire life without ever hearing of a pregnancy that couldn't be terminated. My mother-in-law shrieked, losing all composure. Vesper, I am warning you. You won't get away with this charade. That child will never see the light of day in this house. Alistair is our only heir. I stood straight in the center of the foyer, absorbing her screams under my husband's indifferent gaze, while I saw Greta trembling in the shadows of the hallway. A laugh escaped my lips. Cordelia, you are unhinged. What are you laughing at? You insolent little. I am laughing at your panic. You are terrified I'll birth a legitimate son who will challenge your bastard's claim to the empire? Relax. Whether this child is a boy or a girl, they will never fight for a single red cent of Kensington money. Because your fortune doesn't interest me anymore. Cordelia stood completely dumbfounded, pointing a shaking finger at me. Vance, do you hear what she's daring to say? Enough, Vance ordered. Vesper, go to your room and stay there. I don't want to hear another word. I walked upstairs, locked the door to my suite, and opened my encrypted email. The marital settlement agreement drafted by Merrick was there. I read every clause carefully. It was perfect ironclad legally, guaranteeing my freedom and sole custody of my child, in exchange for my express waiver of any share in the family holding company. I knew Vance valued his corporate shares more than his own flesh and blood. If I had demanded my rightful half of the marital estate, he would have dragged me through a decade of scorched earth litigation to bleed me dry emotionally and financially. Letting him keep his company in exchange for his immediate signature and a cash buyout was the perfect compromise to ensure my safety. I printed the document on the printer in my bedroom office. I signed it. I made a digital scan for Merrick, and I put the original in my bag. The next afternoon, Merrick met me briefly at a discreet coffee shop in Greenwich to hand me the final, bound version of the agreement. Read Article 8 carefully, he said, tapping the document. I read the section. The petitioner expressly and irrevocably waives all rights to the equitable distribution of the respondent's marital assets, including, but not limited to, shares in Kensington Holdings, family real estate, bank accounts, and financial investments. In consideration, the respondent agrees to pay the petitioner a lump sum spousal support settlement of $3 million within 60 hours of signing this agreement, and irrevocably waives all parental rights and claims to the unborn child. $3 million, I repeated. It's perfect. I ran a forensic audit on his highly liquid short-term assets, Merrick explained. His personal cash reserves sit around $4.5 million. He can move $3 million immediately without triggering alarms at the holding company. He will accept this deal because it protects the core of his industrial wealth. If he refuses, we threaten to file a public, highly visible at-fault divorce, which would crater Kensington Holdings' stock price by exposing his tax evasion schemes in Zurich and the Caymans. I put the envelope in my bag and stood up. Brilliant. I'm making him sign it tonight. Returning to the estate, I found Greta alone in the living room, frantically dusting the furniture. Vance and Cordelia were absent. Greta, where is Vance? Mr. Vance is in his study. He asked not to be disturbed for dinner. Mrs. Cordelia went out to play cards at a friend's house. The opportunity was ideal. I walked upstairs and knocked firmly on his study door. Come in, his exhausted voice replied. Vance was sitting behind his antique mahogany desk, buried under a mountain of financial ledgers and legal files. Seeing me, he frowned. What do you want? I pulled the divorce agreement from the envelope and dropped it onto the desk in front of him. Sign this. His eyes landed on the bold, capitalized title. Marital Settlement Agreement. His face froze. He looked up at me, incredulous. Is this a joke? I have never been more serious, Vance. It's an uncontested divorce agreement drafted by my attorney. Take the time to read it. And if the terms suit you, sign it. He stood up, walked around the desk, and approached me menacingly. Vesper, do you honestly think you can dictate terms to me? Everything you wear, the car you drive, the food you eat. It's my money. You have no job, no savings. Where do you think you're going to go? You'll be on the street in a week. What becomes of me is no longer your problem. Sign. He snatched the document angrily and started flipping through the pages. As he read, his features tightened. Reaching the financial clause, he threw the papers onto the table with disgust. $3 million. You're carrying a child I don't want, and you think you can extort $3 million from me? This child is your biological son, Vance, I fired back in a monotone voice. The child you tried to eliminate by secretly poisoning me with contraceptives every morning. He isn't a bastard. He is your legal, direct line heir. I will never acknowledge him, he hissed through his teeth, turning his back to me. Get the abortion, and we can go back to how things were. Otherwise, you won't get a single cent. And how do you plan to deprive me of it? By kicking me out of the house? You need a court order for that. And a divorce trial in the state of New York will require a complete equitable distribution of our marital assets. Your 6 real estate properties, your investment portfolios, your shares in the family holding company, and especially the $1.5 million you discreetly wired to a shell company in the Cayman Islands for Sloan Dempsey over the last 3 years. Are you truly prepared to see half your empire handed over to your scorned, legally wedded wife? Vance spun around, panic clearly readable in his eyes. Did you honestly think I didn't know about Sloan? I continued, my tone sharp as glass. Did you think I didn't know Alistair is your son? That you're paying secret alimony to his mother, and that you're preparing to relocate them to Bermuda? I know everything, Vance. Since the very first day you brought that baby home, I found the medical records in your jacket. I had covert DNA tests run that confirmed your paternity at 99.9%. I have tracked every single one of your offshore financial transfers. Vance's face drained of all color. How? How could you possibly access all of that? He stammered, his voice shaking. I allowed myself an icy smile. You forgot that I got my JD from Columbia Law, and that I worked for a federal judge in the Southern District of New York. Vance, you thought your financial structures were bulletproof? To a trained eye, they are embarrassingly amateurish. He collapsed into his leather chair, dazed, before being seized by a sudden fit of rage. He leaped up, grabbed my wrist with a force that threatened to snap the bone. You're blackmailing me! Enduring the sharp pain, I bored my eyes into his. I am offering you an honorable exit. Sign this settlement. Pay the $3 million. Waive your parental rights, and I will disappear from your life permanently, without making a wave. If you refuse, tomorrow morning I file an at-fault divorce in Manhattan. I will press criminal charges against you for the covert administration of noxious substances regarding the birth control in my drink. And I will have the SEC and the IRS audit Sloan for receiving embezzled corporate funds via offshore accounts. Need I remind you that my old law professor is now a federal judge, and my uncle sits on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals? Imagine the media fallout on Kensington Holdings' stock price when this goes public. His grip loosened. He stumbled back 2 steps, leaning against his bookshelf, breathing heavily like a man starved of oxygen. Vesper. How could you become so calculated? He murmured, his voice hoarse. You made me this way, Vance, I replied, feeling tears of rage prick the corners of my eyes without ever letting them fall. You cheated on me for 5 years. You chemically poisoned me. You kept a mistress, fathered a secret child, and had the absolute unmitigated gall to make me raise him under my own roof. And now you're surprised that I'm fighting back? I stepped up to the desk. I picked up a Mont Blanc pen from the leather blotter and held it out to him. Sign? He stared at the pen but didn't move to take it. Very well, you have 24 hours to think about it, I declared, placing the pen down on top of the document. Tomorrow at this exact time, I either have the signed agreement in my hands, or my lawyer files the papers in court and forwards the entire forensic audit to the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Wall Street Journal. Choose your side. I turned away and walked out of the study. On the landing near the stairs stood Greta, a teacup in hand. She had obviously heard everything. She was as pale as a sheet. Greta, I said as I walked past her, I will choose not to press criminal charges against you as an accessory to poisoning, on the sole condition that you maintain absolute silence about everything happening here. You owe me that much. The housekeeper simply looked down, trembling. I locked myself in my room, collapsing onto the hardwood floor against the door. My whole body shook with spasms of nervous tension, My ruthless determination in front of Vance had been a pure theatrical performance. Deep down, I was terrified, but by playing the role of a cold, implacable woman, I realized it was no longer just an act. I had nothing left to lose, and that was what made me invincible. My phone buzzed. A text from Merrick. I gave him the agreement. He has 24 hours to sign. I think he'll cave. Why are you so sure? Because Vance isn't afraid of divorce. He's afraid of losing his social status and ruining the family reputation. For the Kensingtons, appearances are more precious than life itself. A public scandal involving embezzlement and domestic poisoning would destroy him socially and industrially. He will sign. Understood. We regroup tomorrow. I activated the hidden camera feed in his study on my phone. Vance was sitting at his desk, as still as a stone statue, staring at the divorce agreement. Suddenly, in a fit of impotent rage, he swept his arm across the desk, violently knocking every file and ledger to the floor, letting out a guttural howl of a wounded animal. Vesper. I cut the video feed and closed my eyes, resting my hand on my stomach. Did you hear that? My baby? Your father hates me. But it doesn't matter. I don't love him anymore, and that is what's destroying him. Vance didn't wait for the deadline. The next morning at 7 a.m., he knocked on my door. When I opened it, he stood on the threshold, his features drawn from a sleepless night, his bespoke shirt wrinkled, the collar unbuttoned. He held the signed settlement in his right hand. I signed, he rasped. But $3 million is out of the question. I don't have that kind of liquid cash on hand without jeopardizing the holding company's operational liquidity. You managed to wire $1.5 million to the Caymans for Sloan, Vance. Don't try to convince me you can't find $3 million to guarantee your immunity from federal prison. Those were complex asset transfers. Stop lying, Vance, I cut in coldly. You've lied for 5 years. It's over. He stepped into the room and walked over to the window, turning his back to me. $2 million. I'll wire you $2 million, and you leave immediately. $3 million, I repeated inflexibly. You recently siphoned $5 million from the holding company's reserve funds using fake consulting invoices to park it in an escrow account in Zurich. That is textbook corporate fraud. If you don't pay my $3 million, I am handing the audit trail over to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division this afternoon. You won't just risk ruin, Vance. You'll risk a very long stay in federal prison. Vance turned bone white. How? How did you find out about the Zurich account? I told you. Your secrets are gone. I sat down at my vanity and calmly began brushing my hair. Sign, Vance. It's your only lifeline. He stood petrified in the middle of the room. After a long minute of silence, he walked slowly toward me, dropped to his knees, and looked up at my face with bloodshot eyes. Vesper! His voice broke. Did it really have to come to this? I looked down at the man literally groveling at my feet. You paved this road, Vance. I know I made unforgivable mistakes. He grabbed my hand, which lay limp in his grip. My relationship with Sloan. The pills. I regret all of it, but I realize today that you are the only woman of true value in my life. Give me a second chance. I'll change, I promise. We will raise this child together. We'll build a real family. I'll banish Alistair and Sloan to Bermuda. I never want to hear from them again. It will just be you, me, and our baby. I violently yanked my hand away from his grip, standing up to step away. Vance, the fact that you are a traitor and a coward is one thing, but do not insult my intelligence. You are telling me you are ready to abandon your own biological son, this Alistair. You've been doting on for months just to save your financial interests and your public image? How could I, for even 1 second, imagine building a future with a creature so utterly repulsive? The man collapsed face first onto the rug, sobbing like a punished child. Vance Kensington, heir to a prestigious dynasty, a respected Wall Street titan, was weeping at my feet. Vesper, I'm begging you, don't leave me. I can't live without you. I watched him from above, feeling a complex mix of emotions that contained neither pity nor regret, but an immense weariness tinged with disgust. He still didn't understand what this was about. He thought I was leaving out of jealousy over Sloan, or anger over the lies. He couldn't grasp that I was fleeing a marriage where I was never treated as a human being. I was his social prop, a supposedly barren womb in his mother's eyes, a legally binding signature to validate his status. For 5 years, I had lost my identity to the title of Mrs. Kensington. Initial the financial amendments to the agreement, I repeated. After several long minutes of useless tears, he painfully got up, grabbed the pen, and put his trembling initials on the $3 million clause. He threw the pen on the floor, staring at me with pure hatred. "You'll regret this, Vesper." "Maybe," I replied, retrieving the signed papers. "But right now, my only regret is not leaving 5 years ago." I walked down the stairs, my designer bag tucked under my arm, containing the precious document. Cordelia had just returned and was sitting in the living room, holding baby Alistair, while Greta prepared tea. Seeing the papers in my hand, her features hardened. "What is that?" "Divorce settlement, signed by your son." Cordelia leaped to her feet, almost dropping the baby, who immediately began to scream in terror. Without a second thought for the crying infant, she lunged at me, trying to snatch the papers. I swiftly dodged her, zipping the document safely into my bag. "You won't get a single cent of Kensington money, you miserable bitch," she shrieked. "Calm down, Cordelia. I'm not touching your precious empire. I'm simply leaving with the spousal support legally owed for the upbringing of your future grandson." "What grandson?" she sneered. "We don't even know if this fake pregnancy of yours will go to term. And even if it does, that child won't ever be worth the money you're demanding. Consider it the price of the youth you stole from me," I concluded, turning toward the front door. "Stop right there," my mother-in-law screamed. "Leave those documents. That is family property." I didn't bother turning around. I pulled open the heavy oak door. The bright afternoon sun almost blinded me. "Vesper," Vance's voice echoed from the top of the stairs, breathless and broken. "Are you really leaving?" I looked back one last time. He stood on the landing, gripping the wrought iron railing, his face gray as ash. He looked like a marble statue on the verge of crumbling to dust. "Yes, I'm leaving," I said softly. "I wish you all the best with Sloane." I crossed the threshold of the Kensington estate. Behind me rose my mother-in-law's screams, Alistair's piercing cries, Greta's vain attempts to calm them, and the deathly silence of my husband. I didn't look back. Merrick's car was waiting outside the main iron gates. As I approached, he flashed his headlights and opened the passenger door for me. I got in, buckled my seatbelt, and clutched my bag to my chest. Merrick pulled away without a word, speeding away from the elite neighborhoods of Greenwich toward the interstate. The familiar landscape blurred past the window, slowly fading away. "Where are we going?" Merrick asked. "Drop me off at a discreet hotel for now. Then I'll look for an apartment to rent in the city. I'll find a job as a lawyer and rebuild my life from scratch." Merrick glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Do you have enough cash to survive the short term?" I opened my wallet. I had 3 $100 bills and my Kensington Platinum card, which Vance would surely freeze within the hour. "Personal cash?" "Enough for 3 days." Merrick popped open the glove box of his Audi, pulled out an envelope thick with cash, and handed it to me. "There's about $5,000 in there. Take it. It's an advance on our future payout." I looked at the envelope hesitantly. "Take it, Vesper," he insisted in a tone that brokered no argument, practically forcing it into my bag. "You aren't alone anymore. You have a child to feed. You can choose to skip meals, but the baby doesn't have that option." I placed a hand on my stomach. After a moment of silence, I nodded slowly. "Thank you, Merrick. Thank me when we get a judge to officially rubber stamp this settlement. Take care of yourself." Merrick dropped me off at a high-end, discreet boutique hotel in Manhattan and booked me a suite for an entire week. Once inside my room, I locked the door, dropped my bag on the bed, and sat down. The silence of the room was broken only by the low hum of the AC. I took out the divorce settlement. At the bottom of the final page was the jagged signature of Vance Kensington. 5 years of my life, wiped away by a few strokes of ink on legal-sized paper. I walked into the bathroom, turned on the cold water, and splashed my face. My reflection showed a pale woman, eyes tired from nervous exhaustion, but burning with a new, untamable light. As of this moment, I was no longer Mrs. Kensington. I was Vesper Sterling, 32, divorcing, pregnant, with $5,300 in my pocket. But I was finally free. I dried my face, went back to the bed, and booted up my laptop to start looking for jobs. 32 years old, JD from Columbia Law, 2 years as a federal law clerk, and a 5-year employment gap. That blank space on my resume was an open wound, but I knew how to frame it. It wasn't a gap. It was a grueling, unpaid boot camp, paid for with my tears and my youth. I had learned to decode human nature at its darkest, to protect myself from master manipulators, and to rise from the worst trials. It was an education no law school could ever provide. My phone buzzed. A text from Merrick. "Vance just called me. He is threatening to press charges against you for extortion and blackmail." I let out a genuine laugh. Let him try. I have the counter evidence for every single claim. It's a pathetic intimidation tactic. "I know," Merrick replied. "He's a coward. He'll never go through with it. What are your plans for tomorrow?" I looked out the window. The sun was setting over the New York skyline, bathing the city in a warm, golden light. Survive first, then live better than anyone else. Merrick's phone call woke me up with a jolt at 2 a.m. Vesper. His voice was low but urgent. "Vance is finalizing the concealment of his remaining assets. I just got a tip from a highly reliable source. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., he has an appointment with his corporate attorneys to transfer his entire 15% stake in Kensington Holdings to Sloan Dempsey." I sat bolt upright in bed, turning on the nightstand lamp. 15% stake? What's the current market valuation? Roughly $40 million, Merrick stated. But that's not the worst part. The second the transfer deed is filed, he plans to submit a petition for Chapter 11 personal bankruptcy, declaring himself legally insolvent. If that goes through, all his creditors are frozen, and you will never see a single dime of your $3 million settlement. My legal brain fired up instantly. Where is he right now? At the Greenwich estate. Elias confirmed his Porsche is parked in the driveway. He's home. Got it. Vesper, what are you going to do? Do not do anything reckless. I hung up without answering. I threw on my clothes, grabbed my bag, and ran out to catch a late-night Uber. 45 minutes later, I stood outside the wrought iron gates of the Kensington estate. It was 3 a.m. The street was plunged into darkness, except for a faint light spilling from Vance's second-floor study window. I pressed the intercom button firmly. After several agonizing minutes, Greta's exhausted silhouette appeared at the gate, wearing a bathrobe. Seeing me, she froze. "Mrs. Vesper, please, what are you doing here at this hour? Open the gate, Greta. This is a matter of life and death." She hesitated, then pressed the unlock button. I pushed through, power walked up the driveway, and took the stairs 2 at a time, up to Vance's study. Without knocking, I violently pushed open the heavy oak doors. Vance was sitting behind his desk, surrounded by stacks of legal documents, the glow of his monitor cutting through the dim room. Seeing me, his features twisted in shock. He jumped up. "How did you get in here?" "Very easily." I walked up to the desk and scanned the papers scattered across it. The share transfer deeds naming Sloan Dempsey, the Chapter 11 bankruptcy petition, the liquidation ledgers. Everything was there. "Vance, are you seriously about to transfer your 15% stake to Sloan to organize a fraudulent bankruptcy?" I grabbed the transfer deed to read it. His face turned ghostly pale. "Who told you?" "It doesn't matter. My question is simple. How do you plan to honor the $3 million divorce settlement if you voluntarily strip yourself of your assets?" Vance glared at me. His initial panic slowly morphed into a sick, triumphant smirk. He let out a dark laugh. "Vesper, did you really think you won? In our settlement, it explicitly states that the spousal support is payable from my personal liquid assets. If my personal assets are officially reduced to 0 by tomorrow morning, what exactly do you plan to seize?" He stepped closer, towering over me with unconcealed contempt. "You threatened me with a massive lawsuit and exposing my assets. Do it. The second I file this transfer and the bankruptcy court declares me insolvent, I will be legally ruined under U.S. law. What do you hope to extract from a legally bankrupt man? And how do you plan to raise that bastard in your stomach without a dime of child support?" I stood perfectly still, holding his furious gaze. Vance grabbed my chin roughly. I told you. You will bitterly regret trying to outsmart me. I shoved his arm away violently. I took a step back and pulled my phone from my coat pocket, tapping the screen to play my most recent audio file. Vance's voice echoed through the quiet study, crisp, clear, and damning. If my personal assets are officially reduced to zero by tomorrow morning, what exactly do you plan to seize? The second I file this transfer and the bankruptcy court declares me insolvent, I will be legally ruined. What do you hope to extract from a legally bankrupt man? Vance's smirk vanished instantly, replaced by a deathly pallor. You recorded me. From the second I walked in, Vance, every single word you just said, openly admitting your intent to commit bankruptcy fraud and hide assets to evade a legal divorce settlement, has already been uploaded to a secure cloud server managed by my attorney. I slipped the phone back into my bag. You thought you won. You lost. The moment you decided to strip me of everything to fund your mistress and your bastard child, you signed your own death warrant. He collapsed into his chair, gripping his head with both hands like a man suffocating. Vance, I am giving you one final chance to keep your freedom, I said in a cold, measured tone. First, you shred this fraudulent transfer deed immediately. Second, you order your bank to wire the $3 million into my attorney's escrow account by noon tomorrow. Third, you sign the addendum irrevocably waiving your parental rights. If you do this, the audio recording stays sealed. If you refuse, I am sending it to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York and the SEC by 9:00 a.m. You won't just lose your company. You are going to spend the next 10 years in federal prison for wire fraud and bankruptcy fraud. Vance looked up, his face ravaged by terror, his lips trembling. Vesper, you are a cold-blooded monster. I am simply a woman you pushed over the edge, I replied. Suddenly, the study doors burst open. Cordelia Kensington stormed into the room wearing a silk nightgown, her hair wild, her face contorted in hysterical fury. She had obviously been eavesdropping. She charged at me like a feral animal. You miserable bitch. You dare try to destroy my son? I'll kill you. She grabbed me savagely by the hair, her manicured nails digging deep into my scalp. I screamed in intense pain. I tried to push her away, but with her free hand, she delivered a brutal, blinding slap across my face. My vision swam under the burning sting. Greta rushed into the room, screaming in terror, trying in vain to pull my mother-in-law off me. But Cordelia was thrashing with adrenaline-fueled rage. Vance remained glued to his chair, staring blankly, a paralyzed spectator to the madness. In the chaotic struggle, I was shoved backward with massive force. I lost my footing. As I fell, my lower back and right side slammed violently against the sharp, solid brass corner of the antique mahogany desk. A blinding, agonizing pain like a knife twisting in my flesh radiated from my lower abdomen through my entire body. I collapsed onto the hardwood floor, curling into the fetal position, my hands clutching my stomach convulsively. I felt a warm, sticky liquid pooling between my thighs. My baby, I whispered, my voice choking in my throat. Greta, seeing the pool of blood rapidly soaking into the Persian rug beneath me, let out a blood-curdling scream. Oh my God! She's bleeding! It's a hemorrhage! Call 911, hurry! Cordelia froze instantly. Her hysteria evaporated, replaced by sudden, paralyzing shock at the sight of the blood. Vance finally snapped out of his trance. He rushed over and dropped to his knees beside me, his face as white as a sheet as the bleeding intensified. Vesper! Vesper! What's happening? I stared at him, my fingers digging into his wrist with every ounce of strength I had left. Call an ambulance. I am begging you. Save my child. Vance pulled out his phone, his hands shaking so violently he dropped it twice. Greta ripped it from his hands and dialed 911 herself. Lying on the floor, I stared up at the baccarat chandelier. The light flickered, making me dizzy. The micro-camera Elias had hidden in the crystal was still running, methodically recording every second of this nightmare. The assault, the fall, the hemorrhage, Vance's cowardice. My eyelids grew unbearably heavy. My consciousness began to drift. The frantic footsteps around me, Greta's sobbing, Cordelia's panicked swearing, and Vance's repeated shouting all sounded further and further away. The very last thing I heard before slipping into total darkness was the distant, piercing wail of EMT sirens tearing through the Greenwich night. I woke up staring at a pristine white hospital ceiling, the sharp smell of antiseptics filling the room. My right arm was hooked up to an IV drip. Beside me, the heart monitor beeped with a steady, reassuring rhythm, counting the seconds like a protective metronome. The door to my private room was slightly ajar, letting in the muffled sounds of the intensive care unit. I tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in my pelvis forced me back onto the pillows. I slowly placed my left hand on my stomach. The slight curve was still there. Life was still pulsing inside me. I let out a long breath, like a drowning victim finally breaking the surface of the water. "You're finally awake." A figure in a white coat walked into the room. It was Dr. Rosalind Hayes. She approached the bed, checked the cardiac readouts, inspected the IV line, and nodded with a warm smile. "Your vitals are perfectly stable, and the fetal heart rate is excellent. The uterine contractions have been completely stopped by the medication. But you are on strict bed rest starting today. We cannot risk any further complications." "My baby." My voice was terrifyingly hoarse. "Your child is safe and sound, Vesper." Rosalind sat on the edge of the mattress, her face turning serious. But it was incredibly close. The blunt force trauma from hitting the desk caused a severe partial placental abruption. You lost nearly 800 milliliters of blood before the paramedics got you here. 20 minutes later, the fetus wouldn't have survived the lack of oxygen. 800 milliliters of blood. A terrifying amount. Who came with me in the ambulance?" I asked. "Your husband followed the EMTs," Rosalind replied, her brow furrowing. "He sat paralyzed in the surgical waiting room the entire time you were in the OR. He refused to leave until we told him you were stable. When they moved you to recovery, he tried to approach your bed, but my staff blocked him, per my orders. I stayed quiet, processing the information." "Where is he now?" "He left about 2 hours ago." "You were unconscious for nearly 6 hours. He sat in the hallway for 4 of them. Then, a young woman came to get him. And they left together. Sloane had come to collect her man." "Vesper," the doctor continued, pulling a neutral manila envelope from her coat pocket. "Before he left, your husband left this at the nurse's station for you." I took the envelope. Inside was a black bank card with my name on it and a single sheet of Kensington letterhead. On it was a single sentence, written in Vance's frantic, trembling handwriting. "3 million wired. I accept the settlement without conditions. The child is yours. I waive all rights." I stared at the paper for a long time. $3 million. The agreement signed. The child legally belonged to me. He had capitulated. Faced with the reality of prison and the total destruction of his life, Vance had finally broken. I folded the paper and slipped it under my pillow next to the debit card. "Dr. Hayes, when can I leave?" "Not for another week, at least," Rosalind said firmly. "You are on strict bed rest. Once the placental abruption shows clear signs of healing, you can go home, provided you avoid all physical exertion until your due date." "Will the hemorrhage affect the baby's long-term development?" "Absolutely not," the doctor assured me, anticipating my fear. "You are young and healthy. With proper rest and iron supplements to rebuild your blood volume, you will carry this baby to term with no further risk. But you must remove all sources of stress from your environment." I nodded in agreement. Once I was alone, I picked up my phone from the nightstand. I had 17 missed calls from Merrick Thorne, the last one just minutes ago. I called him back. He picked up on the first ring. "Vesper, you're awake." His voice betrayed massive relief. "Yes, I'm okay. The baby is safe." I heard a heavy sigh of relief on the other end. "I reviewed the hidden camera footage from last night, Vesper. The footage of your mother-in-law physically attacking you and throwing you against the desk is crystal clear. If you want, I will walk this into the Manhattan District Attorney's office right now." Aggravated assault on a pregnant woman. She'll face serious felony charges. "No, Merrick," I replied softly. "I'm not filing charges. I'm exhausted. 5 years of living in a nightmare with that family is enough." Vance signed the agreement. "The $3 million is in escrow, and the child is exclusively mine. That's all I wanted. I refuse to spend the next 5 years of my life dragging them through criminal courts and reliving this trauma. I just want to have my baby in peace and start my new life." Merrick stayed quiet for a long moment. "All right. I respect your decision, Vesper. But know that I am keeping that video in my most secure encrypted vault. If he ever, and I mean ever, tries to come after you in the future, we have the ammo to nuke his entire life. Thank you. Let me rest now. I hung up and lay back, looking out at the Manhattan skyline through the hospital window. Late afternoon was approaching, painting the clouds in stunning shades of amber and crimson. I placed my hand on my stomach, as if sensing my touch. The baby gave a tiny flutter deep inside me, like a little fish darting through water. A genuine smile spread across my face, and as I smiled, warm tears finally spilled down my cheeks. They weren't tears of pain or despair anymore. They were tears of pure liberation. A week later, I was discharged. Merrick came to pick me up and drove me to my new apartment, which he had personally scouted for me in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. It was a sun-drenched two-bedroom with an open kitchen and large south-facing windows. There was a vibrant farmer's market right down the block twice a week, and the subway was a short walk away. The rent was reasonable, and Merrick had negotiated a full year paid up front using the settlement funds. I stood in the middle of the living room, taking it all in. The simple, elegant furniture had been set up by Merrick's paralegal. A cozy sofa, a light oak dining table, a plush bed in the master room, and a solid wood desk holding a brand new MacBook Pro. A housewarming gift from the firm, Merrick said, plugging the laptop into the wall. Never forget the brilliant lawyer you are, Vesper. I looked at him, deeply moved. Merrick, why have you helped me so much? He smiled warmly. Because you are Vesper Sterling. Because I remember the smartest girl in our Columbia Law cohort, whose brilliant future was derailed by Vance Kensington's ego. I can't give you those 5 years back, but I can help you take your power back. Plus, my cut of that $3 million settlement is going to keep my firm very happy for a while. We both burst out laughing. It was my first real, unburdened laugh in months. After Merrick left, I sat down at my new desk and booted up the laptop. Staring at the blank desktop, I felt the exquisite thrill of a clean slate waiting to be written. The 5-year marital hell was nothing but a fading nightmare. I set up a new professional email address and started typing my resume. Vesper Sterling, 32. Juris Doctor, Columbia Law School. 2 years. Federal Law Clerk. SDNY. 5 years. Independent Crisis Management. It wasn't a lie. For 5 years, I had practiced the daily art of extreme patience, psychological profiling, and mental resilience against absolute adversity. I had learned how to decode the intentions of master manipulators, safeguard my core interests, and rise from the ashes of betrayal. It was an education no Ivy League institution could ever teach. I hit send on my first batch of applications to top Manhattan law firms. I closed the laptop and stepped out onto my small balcony. A crisp autumn breeze brushed my face. Across the street, the windows of the brownstones lit up one by one in the Brooklyn evening. Behind every glass pane was a human destiny. Mine had just begun. My phone buzzed. A text message from an unsaved number. Vesper, it's Sloan. Vance was raided at dawn by the FBI and the SEC. He's been indicted for wire fraud, massive tax evasion, and fraudulent conveyance. Kensington Holdings accounts are frozen. The company is filing for Chapter 11. Are you happy now? I read the message without feeling a single drop of emotion. Vance was behind bars. The Kensington empire was collapsing under the weight of its own fraud. Sloan thought I would revel in the vengeance, but I felt neither joy nor sadness. I just felt peace. That man, that toxic marriage, those destructive lies were permanently erased from my world. I deleted the text and blocked Sloan's number. I walked back inside my warm apartment, took a hot shower, and slid into my crisp new sheets. I gently placed both hands on my stomach. The baby gave a soft, rhythmic kick against my palm. "Good night, my treasure," I whispered into the quiet dark of my new bedroom. "Mommy loves you with all her heart."